Hey everyone, I'm not so sure I can do with my mom's phone every day, so I'm taking this case to my own hands. I'm reading Roald Dahl Fantastic Mr. Fox. Come join me. Chapter 1. The Three Farmers. Down the valley there were three farms. The owner of these farms had done well. They were rich men. They were also nasty men. All three of them were about as nasty and mean as any man you can meet. Their name was Farmer Boggis, Farmer Bruins, and Farmer Beans. Boggis was a chicken farmer. He kept thousands of chickens. He's enormously fat. This was because he ate three boiled chickens smothered with dumplings every day for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Wow, that will be 9 chickens because 3 times 3 is 9. Bruins was a duck and goose farmer. He kept thousands of ducks and geese. He was a kind of pot-bellied dwarf. He was so sure his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool in the world. His food was still nuts and goose livers. He mashed the livers into a disgusting paste and then stuffed the paste into the donuts. Ew. This diet gave him a tummy ache and a beastly temper. Bean was a turkey and apple farmer. He kept thousands of turkeys in an orchard full with apple trees. He never ate any food at all. Instead, he drank gallons of strong cider, which he made from the apples in his orchard. He was thin like a pencil and the cleverest of them all. Bogies, Bruce, and Bean. One fat, one short, one lean. These horrible crooks, so different in looks, were none the less equally mean. That is what the children round about used to sing when they saw them. Chapter 2. Mr. Fox. On the hill above the valley there was a wood. In the wood there was a huge tree. Under the tree there was a hole. In the hole lived Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and their 4 small foxes. Every evening as it got dark, Mr. Fox would say to Mrs. Fox, "Well, my darling, what should it be this time? A plump chicken from Bogus, a duck or a goose from Bruins, or a nice turkey from Bean?" And what Mrs. Fox had told him was she wanted, Mr. Fox would creep down the valley in the darkness of the night and help himself. Buggy, Spoons, and Bean knew very well what was going on, and it made them wild of rage. They were not men who liked to give anything away, less still did they like anything to be stolen from them. So every night, each of them would take his shotgun and hide in a dark place somewhere on his own farm, hoping to catch the robber. But Mr. Fox was too clever for them. He always approached the farm with the wind blowing in his face, and this meant that if any men were lurking in the shadows ahead, the wind would carry the smell of the men to Mr. Fox's nose from far away. Thus, if Mr. Boggies was hiding behind this chicken house number 1, Mr. Fox would smell him out from 50 yards off and quickly change direction, heading to chicken house number 4 at the other end of the farm. Dang and blast that lousy beast," cried Bogus. "I like to rip his guts out," said Bruce. "He must be killed," cried Bean. "But how?" said Bogus. How on earth can we catch the lightener? Bean picked up his nose delicately with a long finger. I have a plan, he said. You never had a decent plan yet, said Bruins. Shut up and listen. Well, shut up is not a good speak, so don't do that, okay? Okay, continue, said Bean. Tomorrow night we'll all hide just outside the hole where the fox lives. We'll wait until day comes out, then bang, 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 bang. Very clever, said Bruce. But first we shall have to find the hole. My dear Bruce, I already found it, said the crafty Bean. It's up in the wood on the hill. It's under a huge tree. And chapter 3, the shooting. Well, my darling, said Mr. Fox, what shall it be tonight? I think we'll have duck tonight, said Mrs. Fox. Bring us 2 fat ducks, if you please. 1 for you and 1 for me, and 1 for the children. Duck shall be, said Mr. Fox. Bruce is best. Now, do be careful, said Mrs. Fox. My darling, said Mr. Fox, I can smell those goons a mile away. I can even smell one from the other. Bogus gives up a filthy stink of rotten chicken skins. Bruce reeks with ghost slivers, and as for Bean, the fumes of the apple cider hang around him like poisonous gases. Yes, but don't just get careless, said Mrs. Fox. You know they'll be waiting for you, all 3 of them. Don't you worry about me, said Mr. Fox. I'll see you later. But Mr. Fox would not have been quiet, so cocky had he known exactly where the 3 farmers are waiting in the moment. They were just outside the entrance of the hall, each one crouching behind a tree with his gun loaded. And what is more, they had chosen their positions very carefully, making sure that the wind is not blowing from them towards the foxhole. In fact, it was blowing in the opposite direction. There was no chance of them being smelled out. Mr. Fox crept up in the dark tunnel of the mouth of his hole. He poked his long, handsome face into the night air and sniffed once. He moved an inch or 2 forward and stopped. He sniffed again. He was always especially careful when he would come out of his hole. He inched forward a little more. His front half of the body was now open. His black nose twitched to side by side, sniffing and sniffing to signs of danger. He found none, and he was just about to go trotting forward into the wood when he heard or thought he heard a tiny noise, soft rustling around, as though someone had moved a foot ever so gently through the patch of leaves. Mr. Fox flattened his body against the ground and lay very still, his eyes pricked. He waited for a long time, but he heard nothing more. It must have been a field mouse, he told himself, or some other animal. He crept a little farther out of the hole, then further still. He was almost right to the open now. He took a last careful look around. The wood was murky and very still. Somewhere in the sky there was the moon shining. Just then, his sharp eyes caught a glint of something bright behind the tree, not far away. It was a small silver peck of moonlight shining on a polished surface. Mr. Fox lay still, watching it. What on earth is it? Now it was moving. It was coming up and up. Great heavens! It was a barrel of gun! Quicker than wind, Mr. Fox jumped back into his hole. At the same instant, the entire woods seemed to explode around him. The smoke from the 3 guns floated upward into the night air. Bogus and Bruins and Bean came out of the behind their trees and walked towards the hole. "Did we get it?" said Bean. One of them shone a flashlight on the hole. And there on the ground, in the circle of light, half in and half out of the hole, lay the poor tattered bloodstained remains of a fox's tail. Bean picked it up. "We got the tail, but we missed the fox," he said, tossing the thing away. "Dang and blast," said Bogies. "We shot too late. We should have let fly the moment when he poked his head out. He won't be poking it again in a hurry," Bruce said. Bean pulled out a flask from his pocket and took a swing of cider. Then he said, "It will take 3 days at least before he gets hungry enough to come out again. I'm not sitting around here waiting for that. Let's dig him out." "Ah," said Bogus. "Now you're talking sense. We can dig him out in a couple of hours. We know he's in there. I reckon there's a whole family of them down that hole," Bruce said. "We'll have a lot," said Bean. "Get the shovels!" The Terrible Shovels, Chapter 4. Down the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump of Mr. Fox's tail to stop the bleeding. "It was the finest tail for miles around," she said between licks. "It hurts," said Mr. Fox. "I know it does, sweetheart, but it will soon get better." "And it will soon grow again, Dad," said one of the small foxes. "It will never grow again," said Mr. Fox. "I shall be tailless for the rest of my life." He looked very gloomy. There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain of the stump of his tail. "Well," he thought, "I suppose I'm lucky to be alive at all. And now they have found our hole, we are going to have to move out as soon as possible. We will never get any peace if we..." What was that? He turned his head around sharply and listened. This noise had heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scraping of shovels digging in the soil. "Wake up!" he shouted. "They're digging us out!" Mrs. Fox was wide awake in 1 second. She sat all quivering and all over. "Are you sure that's it?" she whispered. "I'm positive. Listen! They'll kill my children!" cried Mrs. Fox. "Never!" said Mr. Fox. "But, darling, they will," sobbed Mrs. Fox. "You know they will." Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels about their hands. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. "How will they kill us, Mommy?" asked one of the small foxes. His round black eyes were huge with fright. "Will they be dogs?" he said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and held them tight. Suddenly there was an especially loud crunch over their heads, and the sharp of the shovel came right through the cylinder. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped up and shouted, "I got it! Come on! There's not a moment to lose. Why didn't I think of it before? Think of what, Dad? A fox can dig quicker than a man, shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. Nobody in the world can dig as quick as a fox. The soil began to fly out furiously behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front feet. Mrs. Fox ran towards to help him. So did the four children. Go down, Works, ordered Mr. Fox. We got to go deep as possibly we can. The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downward, deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and father and all four children were digging together, their front legs moving so fast you couldn't see them, and gradually the scrunching and scraping of shovels became fainter and fainter and fainter. After an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. Hold it, he said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back up the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. Phew, said Mr. Fox. I think we've done it. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone. They all sat down, panting for breath, and Mrs. Fox said to their children, I should like to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should have been old then by now. Your father is a fantastic fox. Mr. Fox looked at his wife as she smiled. He loved her more than ever when she said things like that. 5. The terrible chapter. The terrible tractors. Sorry, it's chapter 5. Okay. As the sun rose next morning, Boggis and Bruce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house into, but they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were very tired and cross. Dang and blast, said Bogies. Whose rotten idea was this? Bean's idea, said Bruce. Bogies and Bruce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swing of cider and then put the flask back into his pocket without offering to the others. Listen, he said angrily, I want that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I strung him up over my front porch. That is a dumpling. We can't get him by digging, that's for sure, said the fat Boggis. I have enough digging. Bruce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, Have you got any more stupid ideas then? What? Said Bean. I can't hear you. Bean never took a bath. He never cleaned, even washed. As a result, his ear rolls was clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies, something like that. This made him deaf. Speak louder, he said to Bruce, and Bruce shouted back, Got any more stupid ideas? Bean rubbed his back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there and it itched. What need on his job? This job, he said, is machines. Mechanical shovels. You'll have him out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels. This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it. All right then, Bean said, taking charge. Bogus, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bruce and I will go and fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick. The long thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bruce trotted after him. The fat Boggy stayed where he was with his gun pointing at the foxhole. Soon two enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their ends came clanking into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bruce was the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. "Here we go, then!" shouted Bean. "Death to the fox!" shouted Bruce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug a hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. No-sized rocks were sent flying and trees were falling and the noise was deafening. Down the tunnel, the foxes crouched listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. "What's happening, Dad?" cried the small foxes. "What are they doing?" Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening next or what they were doing. "It's like an earthquake," cried Mrs. Fox. "Look," said one of the small foxes. "Our tunnel's getting shorter. I can see daylight." They all looked around, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now, and down in the circle of daylight beyond, they could see the two huge black tractors almost on top of them. "Tractors!" shouted Mr. Fox, "and mechanical shovels! Dig for your lives! Dig! Dig!" Keep going. The race. Chapter 6. Now there began a desperate race. The machines against the foxes. In the beginning, the hill looked like this. After an hour, the machines bit away more and more soil from the hilltop. It looked like this. Sometimes the foxes will gain a little ground and the clanking noises will grow fainter, and Mr. Fox will say, "We're gonna make it, I'm sure we are." But then a few moments later, the machines will come back at them, and the crunch of the mighty shovels will get louder and louder. Once the fox actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of the shovels as it scraped up the earth just behind them. "Keep going, my darlings," panted Mr. Fox. "Don't give up. Keep going." The fat bogus shouted to Bruce and Bean. "We'll get him any moment now. Have you caught any sign yet?" Bean called back. "Not yet," shouted Bogus, "but I think you're close." "I'll pick him up with my bucket," shouted Bruce. "I'll chop him to pieces." But by lunchtime, the machines were still at it, and so were the poor foxes. Now the hill looked like this. The farmers didn't stop at lunch. They were too keen to finish the job. "Hey there, Mr. Fox," yelled Bruce, leaning out of his tractor. "We're coming to get you now. You had your last chicken," yelled Bogus. "You will never come prowling around my farm again." A sort of madness had taken hold of the three men. The tall, skinny Bean and the dwarfish, pot-bellied Bruce were driving their machines like maniacs, racing the motors and making the shovels dig at a terrific speed. The fat Bogus was topping out like a dervish and shouting, "Faster, faster!" By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what happened to Hill. It's not a hill, it's a small ditch, a big ditch. It took out twice the hole the machines had dug was like a crater of a volcano. It was such an extraordinary sight that crowds of people came rushing out from the surrounding villages to have a look. They stood on the edge to the crater and began to stare down at Bogus and Bruce and Bean. "Hey there, Bogus, what's going on? We're after a fox! You must be mad!" The people jeered and laughed, but this only made the three farmers more furious and more obstinate and more determined than ever not to give up until they had caught the fox. We'll never let him go. At Chapter 7, we'll never let him go. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Bean switched hot the motor of his tractor and climbed down from the driver's seat. Bruce did the same. Both men had enough. They were tired and stiff from driving the tractors all day. They were also hungry. Slowly, of the huge crater, Bean's face was purple with rage. Bruce was cursing the fox with dirty words that cannot be printed. Bogus was wadding up. "Dang and blast that filthy stinking fox," he said. "What the heck do we do now?" "I'll tell you what we won't do," Bean said. "We won't let him go. We'll never let him go." "Never, never, never," cried Bogus. "Do you hear that, Mr. Fox?" yelled Bean, bending low and shouting at the hall. "It's not over yet, Mr. Fox. We're not going home till we stung you up dead like as a dingbat." Whereupon the three men shook hands with one another and swore a solemn oath that they would not go back to their farms until the fox was caught. "What is our next move?" asked Bruce, the potbelly dwarf. "We're sending you down to the hole to fetch him up," said Bean. "Down you go, you miserable minget." "Not me!" screamed Bruce, running away. Bean made a sickly smile. When he smiled, you could see his scarlet gums. You saw more gums than teeth. "There's only one thing to do," he said. "We starve him out. We camp here day and night watching the hole. He'll come out at the end. He'll have to." So Bogus and Bruce and Bean sent messages down their farms asking for tents, sleeping bags, and supper. Chapter 8. The fox began to starve. That evening, 3 tents were put up in the crater of the hill. One for Bogus, one for Bruce, and one for Bean. The tents surrounded Mr. Fox's hole, and the 3 farmers sat outside their tents and eating their supper. Bogus had 3 boiled chickens smothered in dumplings. Bruce had 6 donuts filled with disgusting goose liver paste, and Bean had 2 gallons of cider. All 3 of them kept their guns behind them. Bogus picked up a steaming chicken and held it close to the foxhole. "Can you smell this, Mr. Fox?" he shouted. "Lovely tender chicken. Why don't you come up and get it?" The rich scent of chicken wafted down the tunnel to where the foxes were crouching. "Oh, Dad," said one of the small foxes, "couldn't we just sneak up and snatch it out of his hand?" "Don't you dare," said Mrs. Fox. "That's just what they want you to do." "But we're so hungry," they cried. How long would it be till we get something to eat? Their mother didn't answer them, nor did their father. There was no answer to give. As darkness fell, Bruce and Bean switched on the powerful headlamps of the two tractors and shone down the hill. Now, said Bean, we'll take it in turn to keep watch. One watches while two sleep. So on all through the night, Buggy said. But what if the fox dig a hole right through the hills that comes out the other side? You didn't think of that one, did you? Of course I did, said Bean, pretending he had. Go on then, tell the answer. Bean picked up something small and black out of his ear and flicked it away. How many men have you got working on your farm? He asked. 35. I got 36. Bogus and Bruce each said. And I got 37, Bean said. That makes 108 men altogether. You must order them to surround the hill. Each man will have a gun and a flashlight. There will be no escape then for Mr. Fox. So the order went down the farms, and that night 108 men formed a tight ring around the bottom of the hill. They were armed with sticks and guns and hatchets and pistols and all sorts of horrible weapons. This made it quite impossible for a fox or indeed any other animal to escape from the hill. The next day, the watching and waiting went on. Bogus and Bruce and Bean sat upon small stools, staring at the fox's hole. They didn't talk much, they just sat there with their guns on their laps. Every so often, Mr. Fox will creep a little closer towards the mouth of the tunnel and take a little sniff. Then he will creep back and say, they're still here. Are you quite sure? Mrs. Fox will ask. Positive, said Mr. Fox. I can smell that man being a mile away. He stinks. Okay. Chapter 9. And this is the last chapter today because we don't have time. Next week I'll finish the whole book, I promise. Mr. Fox has a plan. For 3 days and 3 nights this waiting game went on. How long can a fox go without food and water? Bogus asked on the 3rd day. Not much longer now, Bean had told him. He'll make a run for it soon. He'll have to. Bean was right. Down the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. If only we have just a tiny sip of water, said one of the small foxes. Oh, Dad, can you do something? Couldn't we make a dash for all? Dad, we have a little bit of chance, wouldn't we? No chance at all, snapped Mrs. Fox. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. How sooner you stay down here and die in peace. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quiet still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew he was trying desperately to think of a way out. And now, as she looked at him, she saw him stir himself and get slowly to his feet. He looked back at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement in his eyes. What is it, darling? Said Mrs. Fox quickly. I just had a bit of an idea, Mr. Fox said carefully. What? said Mrs. Fox. "Tell us quickly." "Well," said Mr. Fox. Then he sobbed and sighed, and sadly shook his head. He sat down again. "It's not good," he said. "It won't work at all." "Why not, Dad?" Because it means more digging, and we aren't any of us strong enough to afford that after 3 days and 3 nights without food. "Yes, we are, Dad!" cried the small foxes. "We can do it! You see if we can, so can you!" Mr. Fox looked at the small foxes and he smiled. "What fine children I have," he thought. "They were starving to death and they hadn't had a drink for 3 days, but they are still undefeated. I must not let them down. I suppose we can give it a try," he said. "Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do." Slowly, Mrs. Fox got out on her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from the lack of food and water. She was very weak. "I am so sorry," she said, "but I don't think I am going to be much help." "You can stay right where you are, my darling," said Mr. Fox. "We can handle them by ourselves." Chapter 10. This will be very, very curious because I'm not going to tell you. You can imagine it until next week. And we'll think about it. What will be Mr. Fox's plan? You can think about it until next week. And it will be much interesting after it. Well, that's the time today. Thank you guys. Bye.